Give me a thumbs up when we're okay.
All right, you're good to go. Thank you.
Okay, and then, so I have Councillor Simpson, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holm, and I believe Councillor Avery. If you can turn on your camera, Councillor Avery, please. Thank you. Okay, and we're just waiting for Councillor Pauls, but we have a public hearing starting up in that, so we'll just call the meeting to order, and we'll start off with item 1.1. Are there any items on today's agenda that give rise to conflict of interest or pecuniary interest? Please indicate. If so, the record will show that nobody indicates any conflict of interest of the members here. And then we'll go on to adoption of the agenda. So we have 2.1. The agenda has been circulated. Would anybody entertain making a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated? Councillor Lloyd, any discussion? I see none. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor, indicate by raising your hands. Okay, and that's all of us in favor, all 6. And so that's good. And then we have item 3.1, regular council meeting minutes of July 12th, 2021. They've been circulated. Is there any errors or omissions, corrections, changes? Councillor Chapman, you moved the minutes as circulated?
Yes.
Okay, any discussion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's 6 in favor, so that's unanimous. Okay. We're just a little bit ahead of the 5.505 public hearing start time for the one item, so let's just give it a minute. Hopefully Councillor Pauls will be able to sign on in the next couple minutes and be a part of the.
I'll take some space here and announce that this book is available at the library or at the Gem of the West Society. They just released it last week. It is a history on Coaldale, and it is written by our own curator, Carmen Vermeulen. And so it sells for $25 and it's available at the Gem of the West Museum. I have this copy here for the town office.
Oh, thank you. How big is it?
We are looking at 215 pages.
Wow.
Actually, 218 pages. It's really worth the read. Lots of photographs of old Coaldale and a well-rounded bit of history from its beginnings.
Good. Thanks for bringing that up. Lana, how's our technical issues with Councillor Pauls?
I've messaged him again. I'm just waiting. I'm assuming he's trying to log in right now. Last time we chatted, he was coming in. So.
One other thing, Your Worship, can we have Caitlin turn his camera on too, just so we can see some of his eyes and reaction in case we are going someplace we shouldn't?
Did you hear that, Kevin? There we go.
Yeah, sure did. This is the council meeting and a council show, so I didn't want to look like I was one of 8, but I'm happy to have my camera on.
Thank you.
Well, Roger, you're just being sentimental because there's only 3 meetings left, right? Okay. We're just waiting, hopefully, that Councillor Pauls can be successful in signing on here. Okay, so we're rolling on to 5:05 and we have two public hearings, so it is 5:05, so I'll open the public hearing, and my name is Mayor Kim Craig. I will chair this public hearing. All questions and comments shall be directed through me. Council is here to listen to the information presented and make a decision on the matter that is subject of this hearing. This is a formal hearing and is not a debate. Anybody wishing to speak who has pre-registered will be given an opportunity to speak once the matter as called upon by myself as chair. Each presenter must state his or her full name, address, and their interest in the matter, including whether they are in support or non-support. Individuals who do not identify themselves will not be given the opportunity to speak. Presenters are to stay within the suggested 5-minute time limit on the presentation and are encouraged when speaking to keep the presentation to the point and refrain from restating points raised by previous speakers if possible. If new presentation materials are being presented, you may be required to email a copy to the legislative coordinator. I'll call upon Spencer Croyle to introduce the subject matter of the hearing.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening to you and Council. The subject matter for this evening's hearing, or the first of this evening's hearings, is the disposal of municipal reserve or a portion of municipal reserve land, known formally as Lot 51 MR Block 1, Plan 1911196, more likely known to most folks as the portion of municipal reserve that contains the Cottonwood Storm Pond and surrounding open space and amenities. If I may, I'll continue on with the presentation for this hearing, which is largely just verbal. Lana, if you could go to page 20 of the agenda, just for a visual of what we're talking about, that would be helpful. So this item came before council by way of a request from the developer of Cottonwood Estates on November 23rd of 2020. It was a fairly straightforward request asking for 0.013 hectares or 0.032 acres of land to be taken from the Cottonwood Storm Pond and open space area and reincorporated into one of the future lots that will be created by way of the already approved last phase of subdivision of residential lots in the Cottonwood area. So as a matter of process and recognizing there was a bit of a lag in timing between the subdivision of the 40 odd lots for the residential component and the dissolving of this small portion of area, there's been a break in between timelines. So November 23rd, 2020, council informally approved or approved in principle the idea of moving forward with the disposal of this portion of MR. And now that we're getting closer to finalizing the subdivision of the 40 lots for the last phase of Cottonwood Estates, the disposal of the municipal reserve portion that's been requested can proceed if that's the direction that council continues to want to go forward on this one. So in terms of process, as per section 674 of the MGA, we have to advertise the disposal of a portion of municipal reserve in a locally circulating newspaper for 2 weeks, which we've done with Sunny South newspaper. And then we also have to post on the or near the property or the portion of property that will be disposed a actual hard copy of the same advertisement that went in the newspaper. And that was put out 2 weeks ahead of this evening's meeting. As of this evening's meeting, we've received no requests for further information or from anybody wishing to speak against or on behalf of the disposal of this municipal reserve. And I'll conclude my comments here just by letting council know that there's no bylaw associated with this. Really, it's just a matter of process. So should council wish to proceed with allowing the disposal of this portion of MR, it's really just a formal recognition that the process can proceed from council, and then we would file paperwork with the assigned Alberta land surveyor that is assigned to the residential component of this last phase of Cottonwood. They would file the appropriate paperwork, and then that area that has been requested to go back into that future lot will be dissolved and the MR designation would be removed, and then it would be incorporated into that future lot. So I have nothing further at this time, Mr. Mayor, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions council may have.
Okay, I'll open the floor to members of council if they have any questions. You have a question, Councillor Chapman? Okay.
Yeah, it's more for, I'm speaking in support of this, this position, and it basically just kind of clears things up. And also, will that clear up the whole back lane and that entrance into that south portion of the Cottonwood Estates?
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, I believe the two are unrelated. The other area that you're probably thinking of is about 200 meters to the west. And that has also been adjusted based on a decision by the Municipal Planning Commission. But in this particular case, you are correct that there would be a benefit to the town and a benefit to the developer by removing a somewhat awkward corner portion that would have to have otherwise been kept up by town park staff. That takes that awkward shape out of the storm pond green space area, and then it's a bit of a cleaner break in terms of which boundaries are taken care of by private residents and which boundaries would be taken care of by town park staff.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions then? So as stated by staff, this matter has been advertised properly, and there has been no public request to speak for or against. And we don't have anybody else in the gallery, in the developer or anything that wants to speak for or against this. And as we already discussed, this has received tentative approval in principle in an earlier meeting. So I'll give council one last time to see if they have any other questions. And I see none, so I will close this public hearing. And then typically when we have a public hearing, there's a business item in a subsequent section of the agenda, but there isn't one on this one. So I have a motion that maybe would be has been presented by staff that I'll suggest to council, and the motion goes that council, recognizing requirements for advertising and notification for the disposal of a municipal reserve lot or a portion of a municipal reserve lot as per the Municipal Government Act has been fulfilled, the administration is permitted to finalize the disposal process for the portion of the municipal reserve as described in the staff report joining this presentation. So does anybody want to sponsor that motion? And I'll give that motion over to Lan. Councillor Holm. Okay, so we have a motion by Councillor Holm, as I read. And is there any questions? Seeing that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's carried by all 6 that are in attendance. And then I can, or Spencer can forward you the proposed wording, I guess, and that we did here. And then we can, we're a little bit early for the other public hearing. How's Councillor Pauls doing?
He's just coming in now, Mayor.
Okay. There we go. Let's hopeful. Are you able to log in, Counselor Pauls? Has he got video and audio yet, Lana? Do you know?
I'm just talking to him right now. I'll hopefully get an answer here right away.
Okay, is that it? Uh-oh, I did something wrong.
Okay, we have you on audio.
Oh, well, audio's not bad. I don't know what happened to the video, but I'm here.
Okay. So we have, as soon as you can get video, oh, there you are. Good. All right. So there. And Councillor Pauls, we're in session. We I just want to clarify if you have any items on today's agenda that are a conflict of interest or anything like that for you.
No, I'm fine.
Okay, thank you. So we're gonna start the public hearing. We're in the second public hearing. We're gonna be going to item 7.2. And it is, I beg forgiveness for the public of the start of the public hearing at 5:17, a couple of minutes late. And my name is Kim Craig, and I'm the chair of this public hearing. All questions and comments shall be directed through me. Council is here to listen to the information presented and make a decision on the matter that is the subject of this hearing. It is a formal hearing and is not a debate. Everyone wishing to speak who has pre-registered will be given an opportunity to speak once to the matter as called upon by myself as chair. Each presenter must state their name, address, and their interest in this matter, including whether they are in support or non-support. Individuals who do not identify themselves will not be given an opportunity to speak. Presenters are to stay within a suggested timeline of 5 minutes. And with their presentation, they are encouraged when speaking to keep the presentation to the point and refrain from restating points previously raised, if at all possible. If new presentation materials are being presented, you may be requested to email a copy of same to our legislative coordinator. At this time, I will call upon Mr. Cameron Mills to be our designated staff member to introduce this public hearing matter. Go ahead, Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the objective of today's, the objective of the public hearing is to review proposed bylaw 824 P0921, which is an amendment to amend the permitted uses list in the light industry I2 district of the land use bylaw to include the railway and railway related uses within that column. So two issues, I suppose I'd like to speak to, and I'll address the second one first. So I wanted just to address the fact here in the public hearing that we are doing this a little bit different than the way we typically approach public hearings. So we are having a public hearing prior to first reading of this bylaw, which is not standard. And I do understand that Spencer had an opportunity to provide an email providing some explanation to that, but just to provide some clarity to that, typically we would do first reading followed by advertising a public hearing prior to second and third reading. We have done advertising prior to the public hearing here. We simply have not done first reading yet. There's a few reasons for why we approached it this way. fundamentally what we're looking at is a combination of the timeline associated with the project that's being proposed, along with the relatively tight nature of the proposal. So we only have 4 lots in the entire town that are affected by this. One of which is the former Bill's Electric site, now Live Electric across from the gem. So it's really, unless they're going to build a railway to nowhere, is fundamentally unaffected by this. 3 of the lots are on the south side of the rail line between the rail line and the highway. One of those is owned by Alberta, I believe it's Alberta Transportation, certainly the provincial government or the Queen. So that leaves us with 2 lots, both of whom are owned by Five Sons Transloading, who are fundamentally responsible for the genesis of this application or this change. And so Five Sons is proposing to expand a rail spur there to improve their loading capacity to access the rail line. And in order to do that, this change to the bylaw needs to occur first, and hence the consideration. So there's nothing fundamentally wrong with doing public hearing first. It's certainly legal. From my perspective, it's something that in my first foray into public life or into public sector life, I was with the County of Wetaskiwin for a number of years running their planning and development department. And this is what was done as a standard. So it was typical every time that a public hearing would happen prior to first reading. And I understand that Spencer had a similar experience in Foothills. So it's very common in any other number of municipalities. But we did choose to do it there. So I appreciate council's accommodation for that. And if council has any questions about that side of the issue, I'm certainly happy to address those. Moving on to what we're considering itself. So again, what we're talking about here is the railway and railway related uses, use in the land use bylaw, and adding it to the light industry I2 district. So right now, railway and railway related uses is a permitted use in the industry, the general industrial zoning, which is your standard industrial zoning in the town. It's the zoning that's typically applied in most locations in town. And we're simply talking about adding this use specifically to that light industrial zoning, which is not a zoning that we see very often, in order to accommodate Five Sons. The alternative for Five Sons would have been to apply for rezoning the parcels to industrial, but that would have had all sorts of complications with respect to, there's all sort of heavier industrial uses that I think we can all agree don't belong on a parcel this unique in nature. And so we felt like the more appropriate path was to consider leaving the zoning in place and simply adding the use to that zoning, hence the purpose of the public hearing. Now, it should also be noted that when we're talking about railway and railway related uses, we're not talking about bulk oil storage or grain elevators or anything like that. What we're really talking about is an extension of track. And that's really what Five Sons is looking to do here, so that they can stack more cars, so that when they have access to the trains that come through town, they can load more grain and service more of our agricultural operators within the region in terms of accessing that rail access, which I think we can all recognize from an economic development perspective is obviously tremendously important in terms of getting the region's products to market. The other thing that we need to consider with respect, that I think is important to consider with respect to these lots, is that these lots are from a planning perspective a little bit difficult, right? They're narrow lots, they're right up against the highway, they're right next to the rail line. There are certain uses which are more appropriate in these locations than others. Right now, on those lots, we've had a car lot there in the past, which I think is perhaps not, from my perspective, certainly the ideal use of the particular lot. And allowing for a rail spur in this location provides for a permanent use that basically ends, the addition of some of these other perhaps less ideal types of uses onto these lots. Car washes are permitted in this location, for example. And one of the advantages of a rail line providing this type of use in this location is that it's not something that's going to generate significant, if any, traffic accessing the lot from the highway or exiting onto the highway, which is probably the most significant concern with these lots: traffic coming into the lot, traffic coming out of the lot, accessing into the middle of the highway. which again, like a car wash or something like that is going to generate substantial traffic. Something like this fundamentally won't. There will probably remain an access to the west lot strictly for, say, emergency purposes, but it isn't something that I would foresee as being very significant. So that, in addition to the report and the attachments, I think provides council with a certain amount of information, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions council has with respect to it.
Okay, I'll open the floor to council if they have any questions of Cam. Councilor Avery.
Thank you, Worship. So I've got two questions. One is the traffic disruption at the 845 intersection.
Okay.
How is that going to impact with the extra spur lines in there, as well as the circulation, and if there was any feedback from the residents along 18th Avenue?
Thank you. Yes, we did receive one late piece of feedback that I'd be happy to present to council. At that point, we had one person from that area provide some commentary. As far as traffic circulation goes, again, I would look at it from a perspective of understanding that this lot is already zoned light industrial. And so there are any number of permitted uses within that would potentially generate traffic. And the addition of a rail spur, where it's really just an extension of what Five Sons is already doing, fundamentally limits the amount of traffic that's going to be accessing the highway. So from my perspective, what's being proposed here is actually going to generate less traffic than what could reasonably be expected to be generated from any other number of applications which would be permitted under the bylaw. As a condition of a development permit coming, there would be any number of conditions associated with permitted use development permit. And also consider that the development permit would also need to be approved directly by Alberta Transportation. So they have direct authority to prohibit this type of development. In fact, they have approved developments recently on the site which didn't end up going forward with respect to some storage options that Five Sons was looking to do previously. So exactly how much traffic is going to be generated from a proposal like this, I can't say. Again, we're not speaking specifically to this site. We're talking about generally adding this use to this zoning. But I think it's reasonable to consider that this would be one of the lowest possible traffic impact type of uses possible. And again, with respect to the feedback, we did have feedback from one person. I'd be happy to present that to council during that portion of the public hearing.
Okay, and Councilor Home has a question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Cam, I'm not sure that really answered what I believe the question is. My concern is the rail traffic backing up highway traffic on 845. And secondly, because now we're going to have additional cars that are going to be dropped off and picked up there. And secondly, if you look at the number of semis that line up right now to the east of the existing loading facility, they're already backed up almost to the highway at Dairy Queen. If we end up adding a whole bunch more cars, that also would mean a whole bunch more semis lined up in that same area there. So I've got some concerns with this one as to what the real impact is going to be on, trains stopping traffic and semis backing up.
Yeah, it's a reasonable point. What I would suggest is that what we're talking about is really just a function of them storing more cars while they await the train. So from the semi perspective, the likelihood of additional semis arriving at the same time, I think, is reasonably low. I don't see any reason why that would be the case. And if it is the case, it's certainly something that I think the business could address in terms of how they time that type of thing. And as far as speaking to the backup of the train with respect to stopping on the highway intersection, again, there are other locations, for example, on the north side of the tracks, which have the industrial zoning, which already have this as a permitted use. It would simply be substantially more costly for the existing owner of the station to either move that to that side, but it would generate the same amount of traffic with respect to the rail line at that intersection. So difficult question for me to provide an exact answer for, but it's something that I'm not sure why these particular existing lots would have any different impact on that than any other lot in the surrounding area.
Okay, Councilor Chapman, I believe that the proponent, Mr. Sean Murray, is also available if we,
Okay.
once we get past the administrative part of this. Go ahead, Councilor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. And just further to some of the previous questions, I guess my question along with this is, which way does this spur go? Is it a parallel spur to the other tracks that are there? I've also heard concerns over the years about the number of cars that are already stored on I guess you would call it side rails or parallel storage lines in that section of track between 845 and 13th Street. And so I just want to know if this spur line is just a parallel line. My second question to that is who is really the applicant? Is it Five Sons that is doing the application here? And my third one, or is it CP Rail that's doing it?
Okay. So in this case, again, because we're not doing a rezoning, we're simply considering an amendment to the bylaw. In this case, the applicant is us. But that being said, in terms of the application for a development permit, that would come from Five Sons rather than from CP Rail. So they sort of initiated the consideration, if you will. I'm sorry, what was the other question, Councillor?
Whether whether the line would be, as you just define it, as a spur line, whether it's parallel or is it going in a different direction?
Yeah, no, it would be running parallel to the existing track. And again, it's just for allowing for them to store more grain and service more of the farmers in the area in terms of providing them access to that critical rail infrastructure, right? So it simply runs adjacent to stack to the south of the existing line, and then they have the ability to, when the train arrives, to hitch those in.
Thank you.
Any other questions of administration? Councilor Lloyd?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Is there a drawing or something that we can see as exactly where this is?
Yeah, sure. And again, this is where it's tricky, right? Because the application, or what we're talking about, is not the development permit application, right? This isn't a development permit application, nor is it an MPC meeting. It's simply consideration of this issue. Now, this issue happens to be specific enough that it looks at, obviously a smaller section of towns. So it would theoretically apply to any property zoned light industrial. But if you can give me a second, I can pull up a drawing and we'll see if it's something council can see. Lana, are the Murrays here as part of the meeting? Did they manage to get on board?
They are not logged in, but they were provided the login. And I also just want to add, we just have some little technical difficulty viewing the agenda right now. So thank you. If you wanted to show a picture, I'll need you to share screen. So thank you for doing that.
Okay, is this visible?
It is,
Yes.
but it's very small.
Yes, well, it's a very small drawing. So I'll just see if I can zoom in. Can everyone see zooming in?
Yeah,
Okay, so here, can you see my mouse cursor
yes,
circling here? This is that existing building, okay, where the sales of cars was happening out of.
Right.
So it basically represents the end of the track line here. So they've got proposed track 3 and a second one here that join and then join back up to the rail line back over here, back where their existing conveyor is here, right? So it's joining the track substantially to the east of the lots in question. It's just that the extension of the spur itself is happening. This here is going to be the lot line where the light industry begins. Everything to the east will be industrial. This lot, and then this lot here will be light industrial. This lot here is going to be owned by the province, so it's not subject to what we're discussing. So yeah, the connection point to the train is going to be back here, and then the stacking is going to occur over here. And I'll just point out as well that this is going to trigger some landscaping requirements for the site. So we're going to take a look at and work with the Murrays in terms of landscaping south of this area as part of the, it's going to give it an opportunity to get this section, if you will, of town looking a little cleaner and more in line with what's happening on the south side of the highway.
Okay, and just procedurally, that was just a freebie to give you a preview of what will be involved in another process separate from what we're doing here. This is just to allow the rail on the light industrial where it wasn't a permitted use before, and it's not designing the spur line or anything like that at this time. So I think it's to use a CPR expression, we're decoupling some of this stuff a little bit. So Councillor Holm.
Thank you, Your Worship. So if I'm understanding this correctly,
Hey,
what
guys,
we're
it's-
asking.
Okay, we have live streaming bugs worked out. So we'll just wait for 5:45 by my computer to go live again.
Thank you, Mayor. The live streaming is back running. You're good to resume.
Okay, at 5:45 and we're able to resume. So sorry for that interruption. Cam, can you pick up where you left off there?
I'm not sure where I left off because we were in the question and answer portion.
I think you were just explaining, outlining the what happens in the process after if this change in the use happens.
Right. So what we're proposing here is for this use to mirror the placement of the use in the industrial zone, which is what the lots directly to the east and all of the lots on the north side of the highway would have in terms of it being a permitted use. So it would be approved administratively. And again, all that approval would also be subject to the approval of Alberta Transportation. We're going to provide consideration with respect to the location of the lot relative to both Highway 3 and Highway 845.
And CB Rail is also probably involved in a bit of the overview of the design.
Certainly, it certainly would be in part of the overview of the design with the applicant. They're not part of the municipality's process, but this is one of any number of steps associated with this type of construction project.
And Lana, do you know if the Murrays are available or not?
They were invited to the call and received an invite, but they're not on the call right now.
Okay.
They are away. They are away on a family vacation this week. So I know their intention was to try to make the meeting, but they weren't entirely sure about their ability to access it.
Okay. All right, then. So I don't think we have any other proponents there. So perhaps you can read into record the feedback that was received late today.
Absolutely. So received a question by way of the town website last week asking what area of town it was for and also what the use was. I had an opportunity and that was from a One second. It was from a Denise Ackerman who lives north of 18th Avenue, sort of northeast of the Shell. And sometime after supper time on Wednesday, September 8th, I provided Denise with a fairly lengthy response in terms of what area of town it was for, and explaining that we weren't proposing a rezoning for a particular area of town. Rather, we were looking at changing the composition of an existing zoning where those locations were. Provided her with a land use map showing those locations, as well as a copy of the land use bylaw, and then explaining what railway and railway related uses was, specifically talking about the fact that what we were talking about was extension of spur and not sort of the more intensive railway type uses, bulk oil storage or the things of that nature. Did receive later today, so I reached out again to Denise this morning because I didn't get a response to my response. So just to make sure that she had gotten it, I reached out this morning, said, hey, did you receive that? Is there any more questions or comments? And then did receive a response from Denise stating the following, said, thanks for the info. I don't think the rezoning should happen, as this is also a residential area. The rezoning would result in increased noise, dirt, and traffic congestion. Thanks, Denise. So that's the response from Denise. I can address those statements if that's council's wish, or I can leave it at that. And I'll leave that up to you to determine.
Okay, so council, do you have any questions or concerns, or you want Cameron to address? Okay, Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to ask him to address the noise and air pollution that they were discussing.
Right. So noise, dust, and traffic, sorry, were the three components. So again, the way I would always look at this is to say that the lot in question, we're not looking at rezoning, we're looking at adding this use to an existing zoning, right? So the fact that a light industrial zone zoning exists on these lots is not going to change, right? And so we have these lots in question and their permitted uses and discretionary uses on these lots. And when I look at the permitted use list on these lots, what's absolutely allowed to be on these lots, I see car wash and truck wash, I see building contractor, I see, I believe, like agricultural, like garden center type uses, any number of these uses which are permitted under the existing zoning, in my opinion, and I think it's a fairly reasonable opinion, are going to generate a lot more traffic accessing and exiting the lot than an extension of an existing rail spur onto these lots would be. Certainly from a traffic generation standpoint. And in terms of dust, what we're really talking about is just Five Sons, which is an existing business, which isn't a business that generates a substantial amount of nuisance, as far as I can tell, for the town with respect to those types of issues, being able to expand their clientele to accommodate, a few other farmers in the area in terms of loading grain. So we're not talking about any particular change. What we're talking about is giving them a little bit more space to store cars in between loadings for when the train has the opportunity to access that. So from my perspective, we're not talking about, taking a piece of land that's a park and converting it to something that's of this nature. We have a light industrial zoning in place. That light industrial zoning allows for all sorts of things which generate these types of things of this intensity. And it's difficult for me to see based on what we've been provided and based on the comments that Denise provided, how this type of proposal would be significantly more nauseous, if you will, than any of the other uses which are already allowed. And in fact, in many ways, having this in place solves a lot of those other challenges in terms of makes sure that we don't get any of those other types of uses which may not be appropriate on these particular lots.
Hey, members of council, anything else?
Just
Councilor
one final question. You're looking for all three readings later on tonight?
So I just want to be clear about, I'm not looking for anything. What I'm suggesting is, because of the way this process is done, an opportunity to do three readings does exist. It's certainly not a requirement to do so. The way these types of things worked, and this is again just pulling from my experience where this is a common way of doing things, is you can do first reading, you can choose to do second reading if you want to, and then you can have a motion to go to third reading, which if you have unanimous consent on that motion, you can go to third reading in one sitting. I would certainly support that concept, but it's by no means required. We would come back at the second meeting in September to look at additional readings of the bylaw. Rather than coming back in October, we would have the opportunity to come back at the next meeting if council decides to go that route.
Okay, does council have any other questions or concerns? Is there any other information required of council? If I do close the public hearing, then, we can't take on any other new information regardless of what the process is chosen later on in the meeting. So if now's a good time to ask any clarifying questions or whatnot, to avoid having to have another public hearing subsequent to tonight. Okay. I don't see any members of council that are indicating that they have any more questions or answers or requiring any more clarity on this. So last chance. I will close the public hearing then. Thank you very much. Okay, and then we are now on to 7.1. Al Beauchamp here to lead that discussion.
Thanks, and good evening, everybody. So we have boring bylaw 823-B-07-21 for the area lagoon upgrades in front of council for second and third reading. So previously, first reading of this bylaw was passed at the July 12th, 2021 council meeting. The bylaw was advertised over the summer to meet the requirements under the MGA, which no feedback or comments were received following the advertisement. With that being said, I have the bylaw attached to the staff report for council, as well as some financing information. I will turn it back to council for any questions they may have on this.
Hey, council, any questions of our chief financial officer? Okay, seeing none, then we can entertain second and third reading if that's your desire. Councillor Simpson? You move second reading?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Councillor Simpson sponsors second reading of the borrowing bylaw. Any discussion? I see none, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's myself, Councillor Pauls, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holm, and Councillor Lloyd that are in favor. And I'll ask the question, opposed? Councillor Avery is opposed. Okay. We can now entertain third reading if that's your desire. Councillor Chapman sponsors third reading. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's myself, Councillor Pauls, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holm, and Councillor Lloyd that are voting in favor. And opposed? Councillor Avery is opposed. Okay. And then we have item 7.2, land use bylaw amendment. And we have Cameron for that one. So we just went through the public hearing on that matter. So Cameron, do you have anything further to bring forward or?
I do not.
So Councillor Chapman?
I'll move for first reading.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's Okay, so that's myself, Counselor Pauls, Counselor Simpson, Counselor Chapman, Counselor Holm, and Counselor Lloyd that are in favor. And I'll call for opposed. Counselor Avery. And does anybody care to do anything else? Counselor Chapman?
Thank you, Worship. Just before second reading, I just want to confirm with Cam Mills that when you go into the next deliberations, if this passes third reading, that you will consult clearly and well with the applicants with regards to the process moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. And then, you know, this amendment is, I think, a good signal that, you know, Coaldale is part of the agriculture corridor, where Councillor Chapman spends a lot of time on the Highway 3 twinning and that to promote efficient corridor for goods and services, and this ability for the spur line also supplements and enhances our ability to be a service center for a vital part of our agriculture industry. So I think that this, while a little bit, you know, of an amendment, is an important thing to consider. Councillor Lloyd?
Thank you, Your Worship. Is it fair to ask Councillor Avery why he's opposing?
Sure. I don't think I was given enough information for the traffic along 845 and Highway 3. It backs up every time they're in there trying to get the cars off of that train tracks now. And if we increase those by 30, 40, 50 train cars, it's just going to back the traffic up more. We need to have a better traffic plan before we put more spur lines into our town. I just feel it's going to cause way too much congestion at that intersection.
Okay, Councillor Simpson?
Thank you, Your Worship. So just for my understanding with this going forward, we're not, like, they still have to do development permit and everything. So all that'll be discussed during the development permit, correct?
I can jump in on Cam's behalf if that's all right with Mayor Craig.
Please.
That's exactly correct. Through the chair to Councillor Simpson, that is correct. And this is fairly unique in terms of the properties we have in town. There aren't many other properties that front directly onto the highway. So regardless of any of the traffic plans or analysis that we would request, everything would go through the province and CP Rail at that point. So it's not something that's generally controllable at the local level. If the Murrays or any other entity that wanted to access the highway and potentially add more traffic to it wanted to do that, they would have to entirely answer to the province and Alberta Transportation. And if the province says it looks like it's going to be too much traffic, we wouldn't have much to do with that process. So our local approval of a development permit, for instance, would be just that, local approval, and then everything cascades from there to AT and CP Rail and others that would be involved in the process, just for additional clarity on that point.
Councillor Holm?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like us to consider second and third reading at our September 27th meeting, not tonight. That way, those that are online and others in the community will have a chance to have some more discussion and thinking on this one. And I'm like Councillor Avery. I'm not sure that we had the question that we had answered properly on what is going to be the impact on trains sitting on Highway 845 or at our industrial park access on whatever that is, 11th Street. What the impact is going to be on those trains sitting there for extended periods of time, dropping cars off and picking them up. This has nothing to do with transportation, because we're not talking about transportation and connection back into Highway 3. This is a connection of our through roads to 11th Street into the industrial park and on 845. So I'm like Councillor Avery. I'm not prepared to go to second and third reading tonight.
Mayor, if I may ask a question, just as a result of Councillor Holmes' point.
Please.
More just a matter of process. I don't want there to be a misalignment of expectation between council and the community and staff. So I'd be curious to know if the desire would be to have another hearing, which would require a little bit more footwork in terms of what that would look like. Just with regard to the specific comment about the community having more time to have discussion, none of that would be able to be considered if the intent is to have second and third reading considered in terms of new information being added from the community perspective. So I think it'd be helpful for administration to know exactly what to do here if that is or is not the intent of council.
Okay, back to you, Councillor Home, I guess.
Then that would be my intent, that we pass first reading tonight, which then opens up for additional public hearing before second and third reading.
Hey, Councillor Chapman, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you so much. Speaking to the motion for second reading, I think what we want to know for the land use bylaw, whether the lots that are existing there do not or do fit the criteria that is all like the tracks that are already there. Would they not be part of that that industrial zoning component? Maybe Cam or Spencer could answer that.
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, they're light industrial, so they fit generally within the idea of industrial use, but they're one step removed from a pure industrial zoning as per the town's land use bylaw.
So my question though is that the land use bylaw already for industrial allows for permitted use for rail, but light industrial doesn't. But aren't these lots already zoned light industrial or are they zoned industrial?
These two lots in question are zoned light industrial, and that's the part of the discussion right now, is that it appears that rail use was not included in the light industrial zoning back in 2013 when the land use bylaw was created, and it could have been a miss or it could have been done intentionally, but as of right now it's just light industrial.
So I guess my point is that we're just cleaning up the land use bylaw for that effect, and regardless of a spur line situation, it's just cleaning that up.
That's certainly a valid perspective on the proceedings. Given that it's Cam's file, I don't know if he has something else to add to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and I've tried to be clear in my presentation with respect to this. So, where the Five Sons Transloading building is located, and stretching to the east of that building is zoned industrial, right? And everything from these lots to the north, along the north side of the railroad track on 18th Avenue is also zoned industrial. So in any of those lots, this is already a permitted use. It is only these lots to the west. So it's what having the spur run west rather than having the spur run east or having the spur on the north side of the tracks is really the question. Spurs are allowed, they're allowed in industrial zones. They're allowed to the north of the tracks. They're allowed to the east of the building. They're simply not allowed to the west of the building. The connection point would largely be the same either way. It's simply a question of where the spur, which doesn't go anywhere, would rest. That's the only thing that we're really talking about this evening.
Councillor Avery?
Thank you. I just still don't understand why it's got to be done this evening. What's the impact between today or 14 days from now? So why can't we just think about this for 2 weeks rather than making a fast, harsh decision? Why does it have to be tonight? Why, like, I feel that we're being pushed into something. What are we being pushed into? Like, it just, something's not sitting well with me now that it's got to be pushed through tonight.
No, it doesn't have to be pushed through tonight. We just want to, it's just a clarity matter that, you know, is a valid point for staff to know exactly what the expectation is. If there's going to be an expectation to have more input and public input and new information introduced, then that adds that, you know, complexity that we need to reopen another public hearing. And also, just so we set the expectations properly and put the advertising and whatnot in place to make sure that we're compliant with what goes forward, kind of thing. You know, we already did have the public hearing earlier, and so just making sure that we're setting the proper expectations for council and the public, I guess. Councillor Home.
Thank you, Your Worship. As far as new information that I need, I would really like to know what is the storage capacity in the existing elevator? How many additional trucks would line up when those cars are dropped off to be loaded? And what is the timing of that loading? Because that is going to be a huge impact on the number of Super Bs that have to line up to drop off grain, because they're only there when they're loading the train, because I don't believe there's sufficient storage in the existing elevator to store all the grain that the existing trains require. So it's too bad that the operator of this facility weren't available to answer some of those questions, so that we would have an understanding of how long does it take to get these trains loaded? How many additional Super Bs are we going to see come in? And how long does it take to drop those extra cars off? Those are the questions that I'm very confused about.
So Spencer, procedurally, could we table second and third reading to the September 27th meeting and have that information available? And would we be compliant in not introducing that as part of a public hearing, or just making sure that we have process?
Certainly. So what we'd have to look at in terms of an additional hearing would be re-advertising and then opening a second hearing. So any new information could be presented at that time as long as it's advertised properly, which would mean that given the timelines we have with the newspaper, we'd be looking at advertising for September 21st and 28th, and then having the next meeting or the next discussion, the next public meeting, public hearing on October 11th at 5 p.m. if we're going to be using the newspaper as one of the mediums with which to advertise.
But with our new process, we're not compelled to use the media, is that right?
We are not. We can use one of the following, and that would include newspaper, mailouts to surrounding properties, which in this case is a little bit tricky because it's a general text amendment. So the other option is Let's Connect as the most broadly consumed option in this particular case.
Just a quick question to through to Spencer then. The new public hearing would mean that you're looking for new information as well, subsequent to the land use bylaw for council to pass.
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, it just simply means that if council wishes to have a community feedback that hasn't yet been presented as a part of the discussion at the future public hearing, we would have to hold that hearing. Anything that council wishes to look at in addition can be kept separate. But really the question is, does council want to have an opportunity for a second round of feedback from the community? And if I may, one additional point with Councillor Craig's question, or Councillor, my apologies, Mayor. I had Councillor Chapman on the mind. One additional comment with Mayor Craig's question with regards to what mediums we can use to advertise. There could be a hybrid approach here where we do specifically provide mailouts to those on 18th Avenue around the properties in question, as well as on Let's Connect. And that would help to meet the advertising requirements of our advertising bylaw, or the other option, of course, would be the traditional means with which to advertise, which is newspaper and one of the other forms.
Just maybe to that then, I don't mean to take up the floor here for too long. I just wanted to kind of get clarity on that process. So we've already had the public input for this public hearing. So pending that there wouldn't be any new information, it is a wise time to do that. I would suggest that we that council listen to this on the 27th, and that we would like to hear from the Murrays as to their perspective to what they are looking for here. That'll answer some of council's questions with regards to stacking, to super Bs, to some of those other big questions that are compelling. In the meantime, that'll give council and staff some time to kind of think this through. I'm not too sure we really need another full public hearing for that process. I think that what council needs to do is hear from the developers. I'm in favor of agriculture coming to Coaldale, that's for sure. And I think that here's an opportunity, but we want to hear it so that we get it right. With respect to the folks that are living north of on 18th Avenue, the noise and maybe some of the pollution that might be involved here. So just want to get some clarity on that process as well.
Those bans are technically, if we answered the three or four questions that Councillor Holm has posed on the 27th, does that have to be, can it just be simply a matter of having second and third reading there, or what's the legislative requirement of council?
So if council believes that they have all the information they need to make the decision on second and third, and new information has been requested for council's purview, and there's a decision of council that additional public feedback wouldn't be of a benefit to the overall discussion and considering second and third reading, that would be in line with the legislative requirements.
Okay, so we can, I guess we could have a motion to table second and third reading to September 27th and invite the proponents to that meeting. Would that be sufficient?
Didn't Councilor Holm already make that motion?
I'm sorry?
Mayor, I just wanted to inquire, sorry for the interruption. Councillor Chapman had a motion on the table for second reading. Is he withdrawing that prior to this?
I don't think he made the but
No.
no. So I don't, just for clarity, Councillor Chapman didn't actually make a motion on second reading. And Councillor Avery, you made a motion, is that right?
Thank you.
I believe Councillor Holm made that motion before the discussion. I could be corrected though.
Is it,
I believe you're correct. I believe I asked for second and third reading to be tabled until the 27th.
okay, I didn't hear those words, so thank you for the clarity. So we have a tabling motion then, and all that discussion was probably moot then, if there was a tabling motion. So I'll call the question. All in favor of Councillor Holmes' tabling motion? Okay, and that's unanimous. Okay, so that will happen then. Thank you. 7.3, Land Use Bylaw Amendment 825P09-21, first reading, Cameron Mills.
Wonderful, thank you. So, sorry, 825-P-09-21. The purpose of this is to present this bylaw, being a bylaw to redesignate a portion of the lands legally described as lots 1 and 2, Block B, Plan 49FJ, from the Urban Reserve and Country Residential 2 zonings to the Residential Multi-Unit R2 and Residential R1A zonings. This is in line with the area structure plan, which was passed by council at their July 2021 meeting, and is simply the next step following from that in terms of rezoning in line with what was presented in the area structure plan. And that is shown in Schedule A of the bylaw, which is attached. So the following, assuming we adopt first reading here this evening, we will, in accordance with the requirements of the Municipal Government Act, provide a notice of the rezoning in the Sunny South News and circulate that for a period of 2 weeks, as well as make feedback available through the Let's Connect Coaldale website for the purpose of gathering feedback on the proposal. And at this point, we are simply requesting first reading of the bylaw.
Are there any questions through the staff? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Just with regards to this area structure plan, I last meeting I voted against it, and I just need to have clarity on in terms of if there was anything that came from that this discussion earlier this summer with regards to this area structure plan, and whether we would be including a stormwater management plan in there, including the pond that was originally part of it. Is that still included in there, Cam?
Yeah, so the specifics of the area structure plan are probably better addressed by Spencer. What we're proposing here today is simply the rezoning of the southern portion, which in the area structure plan calls for the lower density residential, and the northern portion to be for the higher density residential, as well as a small rectangle of single family, as well as a seniors complex. So the rezoning is simply considering providing for those things, doesn't really contemplate specifics relating to infrastructure, but I'll let Spencer maybe jump in and provide some context to that.
Thank you, Cam. Through the chair to Councillor Chapman's question, I'm working off of memory, but if I recall at the hearing and as a part of the decision for the area structure plan amendments that were made back in July, the developer had proposed, due to the piecemeal development of the area and the fact that accounting for stormwater management for other parcels that we don't know the development context of yet, or won't know until further applications are brought forward in the future, it's probably best to approach each component or each lot or each set of lots that gets developed as a comprehensive concept on its own merits in terms of what stormwater needs will be required, and then making sure that overall those different ponds and different areas are tied together in a way that's going to be functional over the long term. So I think to answer your question, Councillor Chapman, the revised ASP that's been passed this July doesn't contemplate a broader stormwater plan in the sense that you would like it to, if that's fair to say.
If I may respond, I think that's my thoughts. Unless the Malloy phase 2B really fixes that issue down in that area, because it is a lower area. I've been hearing from people who understand that area is fairly low already. So, the area structure plan in and of itself should define for anyone as to what those kind of and you speak to density and that, and the number of lots that will be on there and that sort of a thing, and whether they're 50-foot lots or otherwise, that it all encompasses what the area structure plan should entail.
Okay, great. I think right now we're looking at this, and the area structure plan was already gone through the process, and so this is the next phase. So I think we have Councillor Home that has a question, or?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move first reading of the land use bylaw and set the public hearing date and time as October 12th.
Thank you.
2021 at 5:05 p.m.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion by Councillor Home for first reading and the October 12th public hearing date and time. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that is all of us in favor, so that's unanimous. Thank you. And then we move on to item 7.4, and Spencer is going to introduce the Assessment Review Board Bylaw 826 AP 09-21. Spencer.
Thank you, Mayor. The item before council with agenda item 7.4 is very much just a minor text amendment to the existing assessment review board bylaw. So council likely recalls earlier this year, we made a larger change based on the Old Man River Regional Service Commission's advice to change from previous wording based on a previous version of the MGA to updated wording that allows for us to recognize local versus composite assessment review boards to be in line with the current version of the MGA. In a similar sense, this is simply saying that in the past, the bylaw that was originally created and prepared by the Regional Services Commission read designated officer instead of clerk. And now the updated version of the MGA uses the word clerk to recognize the person who puts the administrative time in to support the board and prepare for hearings and things of that nature. So really, this is just to further align with the MGA, moving away from the designated officer term, which has a different context and a different meaning in today's version of the MGA than it did in the past. And so now we're looking at the alignment with the MGA by using that term clerk in all instances of the current bylaw where it reads a designated officer instead. So fairly straightforward. I'm happy to answer any questions council may have on this one.
Thank you, Spencer. Any questions for Spencer on this matter? Okay, seeing none, I would suggest that we're available to entertain reading this bylaw, first reading. Councillor Avery moves. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, and that's unanimous, all 7. Councillor, anybody want to sponsor second reading? Councillor Chapman moves second reading, all in favor? Okay. We can entertain all 3 readings if we have a motion that for unanimous support. Does anybody care to do that? Councillor Lloyd moves that we seek unanimous support for all 3 readings. All in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. And third reading, Councillor Simpson, all in favor? Okay, and that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, and now we're on to 7.5, Land Use Bylaw Amendment 827P09-21. And we have Spencer to lead that discussion.
Thank you again, Mayor. So bylaw 827-P-09-21 is the culmination of work that staff has put in keeping in touch with local developers, analyzing the industrial area. And this comes from the March 8th, 2021 year in review report that was provided to council, where we indicated a number of changes and other items that were going to be worked on over the summer months. We're going to be coming back to council for consideration. So this is one of those items, and it focuses entirely on proposed changes to the land use bylaw relating to industrial landscaping requirements. The 6 points that are presented in the analysis section of the staff report are meant to capture what specifically we would propose as changes that are intended to make it easier for developers to understand exactly how to interpret the landscaping requirements that are in place, and to make some of those requirements more contextually appropriate than they are currently. For instance, allowing some of the trees that are required to be replaced by a larger number of shrubs. That's certainly feedback that we've received numerous times over the past several years with developers and industrial landscaping requirements. The second point would be to remove 10% of a lot or site requirement from being landscaped. And this comes from the variety of lot sizes and shapes that we have in the industrial area. We've had a number of very large developments occur in the past several months and last couple of years that have required a very substantial amount of lots of the lot to be landscaped. So in that particular case, this kind of takes the burden off of using parts of industrial lots that would in the future be developed as industrial use versus just landscaped, and focuses primarily on the frontages to roadways and the areas that are most visible to roads and streets in the industrial area. The third point is to clarify irrigation systems are required. There's been a bit of a struggle over the past 5 or 10 years to have some industrial developers maintain healthy landscaping that survives beyond the first couple of years. So there's generally going to be better outcomes if those landscaped areas are irrigated. The fourth point was to clarify refundable security fees are required for commercial and industrial landscaping projects. That again is something that helps encourage the proper requirements are met over time, and that's something we'd like to address as well without being overly burdensome with the rules that are currently in place. To clarify a minimum landscape buffer, which currently, as of today's rules, is 20 feet. It doesn't clarify whether that's to be measured from back of curb or back of property line, because developers have to prepare landscaping and maintain it from the boulevard into their property anyway. This is another way of recognizing if we get a consistent 20 feet from back of curb, that's likely achieving the same goals as it would be if we're taking up additional space in an industrial setting by having the boulevard plus 20 feet being landscaped. And then the sixth point was to clarify for industrial lots, parking areas and loading areas cannot come directly off of the street because that erodes on-street parking, which is important for commercial vehicles. And it can also create safety issues with trucks backing out onto roadways when they should be doing that within the safety of the circulation of the individual lots. The considerations section of the staff report provides additional logic and rationale for each of these points, and there will be additional visual supports that are provided at the public hearing for this particular amendment to the land use bylaw. I would also like to highlight in the attachments, and I'll see if I can get a page number here for Lana to bring up, but page 90 of the agenda is the start of a attachment that was worked on by Mel Messier, our municipal planning intern, and with support from other staff that is meant to be a comprehensive guide in terms of what landscaping is intended to be and how the rules are to be interpreted for the updated regulations that we're proposing be brought into place after the public hearing in October. So this particular item is just for first reading and setting that public hearing date and time. And if there are any questions beyond the commentary I've already provided, I'd certainly be happy to answer those. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Spencer, and thanks to the staff that have invested a lot of time in preparing this. Are there any questions of Spencer? So we have a recommendation for first reading and the public hearing on October the 12th. So Councillor Chapman, you have.
I'll make first reading, and before I do that, just one quick question to Spencer. Through your comments there, the 10% is adequate, removing that as compared to what previous developers or lot owners had to do in the past?
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, I would certainly say yes to that. And additionally, I can provide context from the Municipal Planning Commission side. I think any member of the commission that's also a council member could attest to the number of landscaping waivers or requests for waivers that we've dealt with in the recent past. And these projects where waivers have been granted still look fantastic. And they're technically below 10%, but there's a substantial amount of landscaping on the frontage of these lots that my personal opinion would be still achieves the goals of the landscaping requirements that are in place.
Thank you, Spencer, and I'll move for first reading.
Okay, we have a motion by Councillor Chapman, or is there any discussion? Councillor White?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to make a comment that the industrial area in our town is just amazing. The landscape in there, it's just a pleasure to take people around in there. I really commend you guys for the way it's all turned out. Thanks.
I'm getting business of the week.
Okay, is there any other discussion with regards to first reading then? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's carried unanimously. So we'll look forward to the public hearing on October the 12th. And then up next is we have item 7.6, Area Structure Plan Bylaw 828-P-09-21, Prairie Crossing Area Structure Plan. Spencer.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. In recognition of the fact that the staff report and public hearing at the October 12th meeting for this particular item will be very comprehensive and will include commentary from the consultants who have helped work with the landowner on this particular file. I'll keep my comments fairly brief on this one. Lana, if you could go to page 109 of the agenda. This, as you've already mentioned, Mayor, is to introduce the Prairie Crossing Area Structure Plan / Outline Plan and the information that makes up that area structure plan, which is included in this evening's council agenda. The process that has been used by the consultants to approach this particular piece of property is a version of what we've seen with the South Coaldale revised ASP, and also what's going on with the newly annexed lands to the west of the built up part of the community in terms of public consultation, technical analysis, and following through with the comprehensive style of plan that we've gotten used to in the recent past with some of the lands that are in town only since 2018, since the most recent annexation. So with that being the case, I would ask Lana again to go to page 120 of this agenda. And if you could just stay there for a moment when you get there, Lana. Maybe zoom out just a touch. The visual shown on page 120 of the agenda is effectively the overall concept for the Prairie Crossing Area Structure Plan. It proposes the orange on the south end is 7 country residential lots, a municipal reserve, park space / pond space in the bottom third of the plan area by way of that green and blue coloration. And then everything that's in yellow would be low density residential. And the pink hue at the top is intended to match and continue along with the highway commercial that's already present with the RCMP station and additional future commercial lots that are to the east of that. So it's fairly consistent with what we've seen with the land uses in Parkside, and the details of these types of items and the concept that we see on the screen can be discussed in much more detail at the public hearing, which is where I would suggest would be the most robust conversation to have, because we will have the consultants present at that time to be able to answer any technical questions that council may have. In lieu of that, or for any questions that council has this evening, I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you may have. And that would conclude my presentation on this particular item. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Spencer. Council, is there any questions? Councilor Lloyd?
Want a motion for first reading? Make that motion.
Okay, Councilor Lloyd sponsors first reading. Any discussion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, we have unanimous approval for first reading of that, so we'll hear more in October. Then we have item 7.7. And we have Tim to present on this item.
Hello, good evening. First of all, sorry for the technical difficulties earlier. Thank you for your patience while we got the stream back up and running. Item 7.7 is the Tangible Capital Assets Policy, ARG 32. The purpose of this policy is to provide guidance to administration on recognizing, recording, and reporting on tangible capital assets in accordance with Public Sector Accounting Board standards. The approval of this policy and rescinding the old policy, ARG 13, will not change how we have historically reported tangible capital assets on the financial statements in any way. It's important to note that there haven't been any significant changes to the accounting standards since the approval of ARG 13. The new policy simply provides more clarity and expands a little bit more on some of the discretionary elements around the treatment of tangible capital assets. Some examples of the discretionary elements are estimates of useful life or amortization, capitalization thresholds used in recognizing assets, the choice of using the network versus component approach in recording assets, and the indicators of asset impairments. This policy will establish the necessary framework to guide all departments on TCA-related activities. It will ensure consistent, transparent treatment of tangible capital assets reported on the financial statements, and will ensure that estimates that are used in measuring, recording, and reporting tangible capital assets are accurate and reviewed regularly. Both policies, ARG 13 and 32, have been attached to this staff report. And out of the decision options presented, administration's recommendations are that council rescind the tangible capital assets policy ARG 13 and approve the tangible capital assets policy ARG 32.
Thank you, Tim. Is there any questions of Tim by council? If there are none, then we can entertain a motion to adopt options number 1 and 2. Councillor Chapman. Councillor Chapman, did you have a?
I was just gonna make the motion to rescind and adopt.
Okay, so Councillor Chapman moves staff recommendation options number 1 and 2. The council rescind the tangible capital assets policy ARG-13 and the council approve the tangible capital assets policy ARG-032. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we have I think Cam on the vacant residential tax.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we had an opportunity to consider this. So at the previous meeting, there was a question of trying to get a few things accomplished that have been discussed throughout the term that were seen as sort of being unresolved. And this was one of those issues. Back in April of 2019, the April 8, 2019 meeting, a vacant residential tax policy was considered by council. And at the time, the motion was made to table the matter due to a concern principally around disincentivizing large-scale developers and sort of punishing large-scale developers with this policy, and a desire to exclude large-scale developers from the policy. And council was later informed that it wasn't possible to utilize the tool in that way. It's sort of to define specific individuals that might be excluded from this type of policy with respect to tax bylaw. And so the direction was not to pursue it any further. So it's been left in the ether. But we do have an opportunity to consider it again, certainly. So we'd happy to do that. And so that's been resubmitted, if you will, for council's consideration. So with respect to the policy, to provide a refresher on what we're talking about, vacant residential properties, properties that are the size that one would usually associate with residential development, single family developments, those types of things, can at times create an administrative and operational burden when they exist in a state of underdevelopment or non-development for a long period of time. And certainly neighbors can be upset about that. So if you have an individual might buy one of these lots, say in Cottonwood, and sit on it for 10 years, for example, with the intention of building. And so then, not that all of these are the case, obviously some people would buy them and maintain them, but oftentimes they tend to be sort of poorly maintained. Can cause issues with respect to weeds and unsightliness, requires the bylaw officer to visit and for residents to get upset and call and those types of things. And so what some municipalities do, which is an effective tool in some of these other municipalities, they create a vacant residential property tax class, if you will. So there's a tax rate that's applied to undeveloped residential parcels, specifically defined, that is higher than what is applied against developed residential parcels. Now, obviously, the total tax isn't going to be higher because it's assessed value times tax rate, you'll call, but it does provide a bit of a stick, if you will, between a carrot and a stick, in terms of encouraging people to develop properties more quickly as they get punished for holding these properties through the establishment of a higher tax rate. Is fundamentally how that works. And so, with respect to that, I think generally speaking, my understanding is that there's an understanding of that and what the policy is considering. With respect to the question of the concern for potentially disincentivizing large scale investment, provided a little bit of context within the staff report. It's not an unreasonable thing to consider that it might be seen as a disincentive for residential developers who are afraid of incurring large scale charges. If they create dozens and dozens of lots and hold them for a period of 5 more years, perhaps the economy goes bad and things like that, and worried that they're going to be sort of unfairly punished for taking that risk and investing in the town. So I provided for 3 things to consider. I'd say, first of all, there are plenty of other examples of municipalities which do this type of tax, and we've seen that it doesn't dry up the rate of residential investment. So City of St. Albert, for example, is where this policy was largely borrowed from in terms of its writing. And the City of St. Albert is widely regarded as one of the more attractive municipalities in the province in terms of being attractive for locating resident and incurring development and those sorts of things. Also, from my experience on the private side, I've been involved in a number of residential developments myself personally, and the tax rate associated with holding vacant or residential land wouldn't have been something that had a great impact on the pro forma of a project where I'm deciding on where to invest. Generally speaking, the plan is never to create so many lots that you're holding those lots for a period of 5 more years. You would create enough for a single phase with the intention of selling those lots within generally 1 or 2 construction cycles, and then creating more lots as part of an additional phase. You wouldn't be creating generally so many lots that this would become an issue. Obviously, it's something that can happen. The economy can cut you off at the knees, so to speak. We all understand that works. But the third point to raise here is simply this, that if this is created and one of these exceptional scenarios comes where developer is holding a lot of these in good faith, created them in good faith, and it's not that they bought them from someone else and they're holding them and they're speculating on them, they have the opportunity, like any year, to come to council and ask for council's consideration to not apply that. So there are opportunities for that, for council of the day, if you will, to avoid applying that tax rate to that developer. That being said, it's totally council's decision whether or not something like this moves forward. I'm simply providing the policy. So with respect to the financial impact, there would be a small amount of staff time involved. What we're providing here is a policy which establishes what we consider vacant residential lands, what's excluded, what's included. It applies that we've provided for a 5-year timeline to that, and we've provided for that the policy be that the tax rate will be set at double the tax rate provided for the general residential class, whatever that tax rate is at any given point. What if this policy is passed? What that would do, that would then provide direction to staff during the period where they're creating the bylaw that establishes the mill rate for a given year, to establish that subclass in line with this policy. So when they come to council to get a mill rate bylaw approved, there would be a class to be included here. Given the very small number of parcels in any given year, and it's going to change obviously every year, but given the very small number of parcels that would be applied in any given year, there'd be very, very little change with respect to the overall revenue generated from this type of thing. And provided for council with 4 decision options: that you can adopt the policy as written, or we can adopt the policy with amendments, we can table the matter, or refuse the policy.
Thank you, Cam. Any questions through the Cam on this? And with our thanks for picking this up and putting a pin in it before the end of the term. That was good. Councillor Holm.
Thank you, Your Worship. Speaking in favor of the policy as presented here, I do like it. I like the idea that you have added in there that a waiver could be granted if they come back to council for a reason. I think that's a very, very good thing to have in there in case there is a downturn in the economy or something out of the ordinary actually happens. So I would certainly be prepared to make motion to adopt this policy.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councillor Holm to adopt the policy as written and direct the administration to prepare a bylaw creating the vacant residential property tax subclass. Any questions? Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Also speaking in favor of the motion, just a quick question about the vacant land tax rate. So is that, when you say it's 2 times, is that based on the raw land itself, or if there was a building on it?
Right. Thank you for the question, Councillor Chapman. So the way the tax, like the bottom line in terms of how taxes are generated on a property is its assessed value of the property times the tax rate. So if the tax rate, for example, is approximately 1% and the total value of a property is $400,000, then $4,000 of tax is owed on that property, right? There is no separation. We don't have a tax rate for the land portion and a tax rate for the building portion. If you have a $100,000 lot with a $300,000 house on it, it's just $400,000. We apply the tax rate to that. So if you look at something like this, if if you look at Westgate, about 100,000 per lot, about 300,000 per house generates, a $400,000 property. That vacant lot right now in the existing scenario would pay $1,000, where there's the lot next to it would pay $4,000. What we're proposing here is that if it's a vacant lot, it meets these criteria, it would pay $2,000. And then once a house is built on it, the vacant tax rate is gone and it's simply applied the normal tax rate. So it would go from 2,000 to 4 once the house is on it in that example. Not sure if that makes sense, but that's just the way I think of it.
Okay, so Councillor Holm?
Okay, so now I need some clarification. Are we talking a tax rate or are we talking the mill rate? Which in my mind is the same thing, but
so we're clear, like I'm using the words interchangeably because at the bottom line I'm using is the tax rate is, when I think of the tax rate, is just generated from the mill rate. So the mill rate that's established for vacant residential is double the mill rate that's established for standard residential. But at the end of the day, the result is the taxes on a bare piece of land would be doubled in these scenarios.
So are you still okay with your motion, Councillor Holm?
I am, yes, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's unanimous. Thank you very much, staff, for that. And then we have item 8.1. Truth and Reconciliation. And Kyle, did you want to?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yep, thanks again. So we have the before council decision on September 30th. The federal government previously announced September 30th as a federal holiday for Truth and Reconciliation. Under the legislation by the federal government, this national holiday will essentially be a statutory holiday for all federal workers and everybody who is required to adopt newly established federal holidays under their collective bargaining or union agreements. For the town of Coaldale, currently none of those two pieces of legislation would apply based on our circumstances, considering we're not federal workers and the town of Coaldale does not have it in our collective bargaining that we must adopt newly federal holidays at this time. We are not mandated by legislation to do this. The province of Alberta has also come out and said at this time they are not going to mandate September 30th as a legislative holiday for Alberta. Based on those kind of three circumstances, whether or not the town of Coaldale recognizes September 30th, Truth and Reconciliation Day, as a statutory holiday is entirely up to the town of Coaldale. So comparing, we always compare what others are doing. There have been some municipalities and some government organizations which have publicly announced that they will be adopting September 30th as a holiday for those organizations, while others have not. So it does appear that there isn't any firm consistency on the matter right now. With that being said, two options to consider from a financial impact on council's decision. Should council decide not to adopt September 30th as a holiday, there is no financial impact. The impact if council does to, and not to make this purely about financials, but we're just pointing out all the circumstances. Most town services would have potentially limited services on September 30th, and those requiring to work would be paid stat holiday pay. Another point for town council is if there's consideration of other ways that a town may wish to explore the truth and reconciliation process on September 30th in regards to making this a stat holiday or not making this a stat holiday. And that's kind of all I have on this issue right now. I'll turn it back to council for any discussion here.
Okay, I'll open it up, the floor to council. It's sort of one of those areas where the benefactor of the federal government recognizing something, but then allowing for a hodgepodge of implementation across all the jurisdictions and that. So it makes you wonder if they're really genuine in their intention to honor truth and reconciliation if they don't actually mandate it as a federal holiday across the board. But anyway, Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Your Worship. I definitely don't have a problem recognizing it in some way. I'd like to be more creative and do something other than have a day off. I think there's other things that we can do. I'd like to just hold off, especially this year, wait and see what the province of Alberta is doing. So I would just like to do something different than have a honor the holiday.
Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Worship. I believe we need to look at this as a time to reflect and a time to be thankful for us that have come over here and remember what the Indigenous peoples have gone through in their growth in the colonization. You know, I was a little bit disappointed when we had emails going back and forth and for someone to say too many holidays. Well, my first thought is, well, let's get rid of Thanksgiving. If we're going to celebrate colonization, why are we not looking at truth and reconciliation? It's a time for us to reflect on how the peoples suffered and are still welcoming us into this land. We should be very fortunate. We live in Alberta. We live in Canada. So I really think, even though it's a non-negotiated benefit for our staff, I agree with Councillor Lloyd. Let's do more. Let's reflect. Maybe there's something us as a town of Coaldale can do to help the reconciliation with the Indigenous population, rather than it being just a day off. Maybe it's a day off and we do something for reconciliation.
Councillor Holm.
Thank you, Worship. This is a difficult one on a lot of fronts. I totally agree with Councillor Avery and some of his thoughts on this one. I find it a difficult one only because not because of the day itself and not because of the recognition of the day itself, but the way the federal government has announced this. If you look at holidays within the federal government, when Alberta announced Heritage Day, and then Alberta announced Family Day, federal government employees were required to make a choice. They could have one or they could have the other as a paid holiday. They couldn't have both because in the federal system, they only actually have 10 paid holiday days throughout the year, not 12 like we do in Alberta. So I have difficulty with the federal government throwing this thing out without having any real teeth to it. So I think we as a council maybe have to look at it on those terms, that from a financial standpoint, as far as having a day off, that maybe we adopt this one, but we remove either Family Day or Heritage Day as a paid holiday and have our staff choose one or the other as far as which one they take off as a paid holiday. So I just have trouble with it. I think it's an important part, but from a financial standpoint, I don't like somebody from the federal government forcing financial issues on the town of Coaldale when they themselves didn't do the same thing when Alberta came forward with something that they think was very important, which was Family Day. So I'm having difficulty exactly where to go with this.
So, okay, Councillor Simpson?
Thank you, Your Worship. This is also a very hard one. I think we definitely, it's an important day, and just like Councillor Lloyd had stated earlier, I think it's in a way we need to do something about that day. Of course, this year it's coming too close, too fast. I do have an issue. I don't really understand how this falls in the municipal lap. The federal government should have made a decision and stuck to it. So this is a hard decision for us to make. It's confusing for not only people in Coaldale or Lethbridge or surrounding area, but it's also for Alberta. It should have been accepted nationally or at least provincially. So I'm disappointed in to see how this goes. I've never really seen how this all operates. So our staff gets the 30th off, but no businesses and all that. How confusing is this going to be? Is this just something we accept and maybe, you know, have events on that day? But once again, now we're pulling more staff into work for that day too. So I'm just a little bit, you know, if you get down to the very diagnostics parts of it, how is it really going to work?
And, you know, Councillor Holm makes a great suggestion. I don't know if we have the latitude within the collective bargaining agreement to manipulate different days and move an existing day off within our collective bargaining agreement and switch September 30th for Family Day, for example, and that I don't know how that impacts our agreement in that. And I think the problem too, you know, some people have touched on it, is that it does, you know, Councillor Simpson kind of borderline talked about it, is I think it puts staff at a little bit of a disadvantage in the sense that, you know, it'd be yet again a civic holiday for municipal employees and not for you know, people of the business community, and it might alienate our staff and that by doing that. But you know, that's just a thought that comes to my mind, and I hate to, you know, because there are a lot of parallels to out there about municipal employees and the private sector kind of thing. So this could just be another issue. Kyle.
I'll maybe just take a moment to touch on a few things. Just in regards to Councillor Holmes' question, unfortunately, right now that currently isn't an option based on our collective agreement. It does state which days are statutory holidays. So if we were to say take one out for the other, unfortunately, we would be in non-compliance with our collective agreement. So basically for the purpose of this discussion right now for this year, unfortunately, that idea would be a non-starter. Just to kind of clarify a few things in regards to the legislation regarding it. So statutory holidays are generally, or employers generally follow, as a town of Coaldale, we follow the provincial employment standards, as do other organizations and businesses across Canada follow their related employment standards. So until the Alberta government comes out one way and says we will or we will not be recognizing this as a statutory holiday, it right now is up to each individual organization and business in the province to make their decision, the town of Coaldale being one of those organizations. It could be very well likely that in a year from now, the provincial government may come out once they get back to legislation and say we will mandate September 30th as a provincial holiday, or they may not. We can't tell in the future. Some organizations have come out and said, such as AHS, said we will not be recognizing September 30th as a paid holiday at this moment, as their statement has come out and said we will be doing further research on how to properly recognize the day, while other organizations such as the city of Lethbridge have come out and said we will be recognizing September 30th as a statutory holiday. However, I believe there may be some requirements there under their collective agreement. So if council is unsure what to do, unfortunately, as administration, I don't want to be the one to provide a recommendation on this, but you do have options to, there are uncertainties that you could perhaps wait a year, and over the next year, we could be working with our community service department and put together some type of event or function for next year. Unfortunately, right now, there isn't enough time to put anything on for this year. Or council can go ahead and decide to mandate this as a holiday for this year. So some commentary to maybe help council in the decision here.
Thank you, Carl. I do totally agree with Councillor Avery that the truth and reconciliation is an important element of moving forward and trying to work with the healing process and recognizing all that's important about that. But I am quite distraught that the government of Alberta, Canada, recognizes the day, but like they recognize how important July 1st is, and they have pools of funding that communities can apply for programming on July the 1st and that. So I think that in the spirit of true reconciliation, they should have made a pool of funding available to communities to actually have programming available in that. So it's I again think it's almost disingenuous that they kind of make it important day, but they don't really put any grit in behind it to support all the important things that should happen on the day that they're talking about. So, and I don't think we don't have enough time to really schedule any programming between now and the 30th, I don't think. Councillor Chapman, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Your Worship, and I support the position to leave this for another day or another year, and kind of get a handle on this. I think the issue for me is how we would be seen, as compared to other municipalities even in our area. FCSS discussed this at their meeting 2 weeks ago, and decided that they would also look at kind of a theme day, or a theme that might reflect truth and reconciliation as much as we reflect on Christmas or Easter, reflect on families and Family Day, reflect on Heritage and Heritage Day. We can reflect on something like that. But to have one municipality pay its employees, and then in others not, doesn't really make it a fair field in some ways. I think our businesses as well do pay their employees for 12 days, 12 stat holidays a year. This would be number 13. So I remember in the day when Family Day was was being considered, and the polarization that had in the communities over having to pay one more day of stat holidays. So I'm in support of postponing this for another time.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. How many other provinces have accepted this as part of their holiday package? I'm not concerned about the financial end of it at all with this. I think it's something we do need to recognize. I'm just kind of disappointed in the federal government, very disappointed in the federal government, how they came out with this, and even for Alberta for not adopting it yet. So I'm just kind of curious, have most provinces adopted it? So therefore probably Alberta will be adopting it soon?
Formally, I can't give an answer on that as I don't know the formal answer, but through most of my communications we've seen through email or my Google searches, the majority of places I've seen are not provincially regulated and they are leaving it up to individual business organization choice. So in the context of the question, I don't think Alberta is the outlier, if that's what you're asking. I think we're part of the broader scope of the provinces, if not all of them. I have not heard of anybody who has applied yet, but that just could be to my ignorance on it.
Okay, CEO Hastings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Councillor Simpson, I just did a quick search here, and the provinces that have adopted this as a statutory holiday include British Columbia, Manitoba, Nova Scotia, and the Northwest Territories. Ontario being the largest, declined to do so at this time.
Councillor Holm.
I don't know whether this is going to solve anything or not, but I'd like to move that we adopt for September 30th for 2021 as recognized Truth and Reconciliation Day, that all staff have a 5 minutes of silence and stop work at specified time of 11 a.m. and that we ask administration work towards adding this day to our collective bargaining agreement for future years as a day off.
Would you consider that a friendly amendment, provided the province of Alberta? Or do you want to be separate from the province of Alberta if they adopt?
I believe we need to show some kind of leadership on this. I don't believe we have the time to do it properly within our collective agreement right now for September 30th. But I do believe we need to take some step forward in recognizing this. And I believe that I'm hoping that this is at least a first step.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Your Worship. So if Alberta does not adopt it, we still have to put it into our collective agreement. Is that what you're saying, Councillor Holm? Is it dependent on what Alberta does or not?
I believe we show leadership with the town of Coaldale, and I would leave it as is.
Okay, CEO Hastings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Councillor Holm. In the context of collective bargaining negotiations, would it be your wish as part of that resolution that the statutory holiday for Truth and Reconciliation would be on the table if another stat holiday would come off in terms of it's a trade, or are you going to expand it from the current 12 to the 13? Just wanted to get clarity on that in light of previous remarks.
I think the town can do this on our own, so I would be more than happy to have it move forward with collective bargaining to make it a 13th day if required. Now, that may be part of your negotiations, may be holding of wages or something to cover that. I'll leave that up to administration to decide, but that would be part of the collective agreement and discussions that what I'd like to see move forward.
Okay, I would speak against it only because I think it's already been stated that we've already have quite a number of holidays within our calendar, and if so, adding one more, I agree that the Truth and Reconciliation one is important, but I'd be more inclined to support something that reflected being able to give the negotiation power to show that that's important, but only can constrain the number of holidays to the existing number of paid days off that we already have. Any other discussion? Counselor Simpson and Counselor Lloyd?
Thank you, Your Worship. Kyle, how many, just out of curiosity, how many other holidays are similar to, like, that aren't Truth and Reconciliation, but how many other holidays are out there like this that the federal government has done that most provinces haven't recognized and therefore up to businesses?
Not entirely the context of the federal government, but I'll speak in context of provincial legislation. That's just because related to the employment standards we operate under. Currently, the town has 12 statutory holidays under our agreement. To my knowledge, only 9 of those are technically statutory holidays under legislation. So currently the town already has 3 that are above and beyond that, being the civic holiday, Boxing Day, and Easter Monday. Those are technically not statutory holidays that businesses must comply with legislation. Those are 3 that the town essentially is, most places get those days off, like the civic holiday and Boxing Day, but they're not required to under legislation. So to answer your question, we're 3 above the minimum requirements of 9 at the moment.
And I saw another hand. Was it Counselor Lloyd? Did you have your hand up?
I did. I don't think it's really fair to the staff to add it to negotiations. I think negotiations are complicated enough as it is already. I think that this decision should be made at our level, and I just don't think it should be pushed onto the staff negotiations.
If I could just jump in and add context. The concept of organizations and municipalities, whether or not having to adopt new federal holidays, will become, in light of this, September 30th will become a talking point for all collective agreements going forward. So I can council can rest assured that when the town of Coaldale does come up for our bargaining negotiations within the next few months, this is something that I'm sure of that will come up in negotiations, whether or not the town will adopt new federal holidays, regardless of provincial mandate being that a federal mandate. In Truth and Reconciliation, September 30th will fall into that category. So regardless, this will be part of the discussions when we do come to bargaining. So my recommendation as staff would be, at this moment, council's decision whether or not to adopt it as a holiday this year. Councillor Holm did make a very good point in the 5 minutes of silence. But as far as making a motion whether or not to include this as part of collective bargaining, I can almost assure that this will be part of it, and my recommendation would be to exclude that from a council motion, with being a staff employment issue.
Okay, so Counselor Holm, you want, your motion is on the floor, so you want your motion to remain on the floor then?
I do.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, Counselor Chapman.
Just through to Kyle again, which 3 days are we speaking about that were the extra days? You missed
Boxing Day, Easter Monday, and the August civic holiday are not actual statutory holidays under legislation.
And so our staff are paid full stat for those 3 days as well?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so are you done, Councillor Chapman? Okay, we have Councillor Holmes' motion, and I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, we have Councillor Holm and Councillor Avery in favor. Opposed? Okay, and myself, Councillor Simpson, Chapman, Lloyd, and Pauls are opposed. Does anybody care to make any more motions further to this?
Would you want to receive for information?
Well, whatever, yeah, it's,
We'll make a motion to receive for information.
any questions? Councillor Simpson, you had your hand up as well?
Thank you, your worship. It wasn't a question. I was gonna make somewhat of a different motion, so we'll let this one go.
Okay, I'd like to hear yours, so I'll vote against the receive for information when it comes. So you have Councillor Chapman's motion, and
Or I'll rescind it if you'd like to hear more from others.
okay, Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, your worship. So what I was thinking of for motion that we recognize, is there a way to recognize Truth and Reconciliation Day without making it a stat holiday for our employees?
Well, I don't want
Or
to.
do you have to do both?
I don't want to sound trivial, but we do make proclamations. You know, we proclaim certain days, and that, you know, the town could do that. I don't know if that bears enough, weight and significance to truly recognize it, but that is one avenue that we can have, and to proclaim September 30th as Truth and Reconciliation Day in Coaldale.
And the reasoning why I was wanting to do something like that is so that we can recognize it next year and maybe do something for it, because I do understand that like we can't do something town activity. We can still do the 5 minutes of silence, as Councillor Holm had suggested, because we can't do anything on a large scale within that. But that's why I was thinking, if we recognize it and then be able to at least do something next year for it.
So then is that kind of your motion then?
Yes.
So your motion is to proclaim September 30th, 2021 as Truth and Reconciliation Day, and requested appropriate time, 5-minute time span be requested of town employees who take a moment to reflect upon the day.
Yes, but can we not make September 30th and ongoing? Or does it have to be just for this year? And then make a second motion for that 5 minutes of.
I'm not sure how we can bind future councils on that, but we can certainly.
Okay, then the way you said it will be great, thanks.
So we have a motion by Councillor Simpson to proclaim September 30th, 2021 as Truth and Reconciliation Day in the town of Coaldale.
If you don't mind, could I just ask, purpose of clarity, if it would be or would not be a statutory holiday under Councillor Simpson's motion?
No, it's just a proclamation that we recognize that day. Yeah. Sorry, that was your intention, is that right, Councillor Simpson? Okay. So any discussion? Councillor Avery?
Thank you. I'm really disappointed that we're putting the reconciliation of the past into dollars and cents. So the only reason I'm voting against it is because I do feel it should be a stat holiday, because 5 minutes of silence or 5 minutes to reflect is not enough. We need a day, at least a year. There's lots of other organizations and groups that get a whole month, and that's good that they get that. The Indigenous peoples are getting 1 day, and I feel we need to pay tribute to that. And if it's about a couple dollars for our town staff, I think we're getting really petty, worried about if we're going to pay them or if we're not going to pay them. This is the least we can do for living in the country we're living in the province we're living in. I don't care what Alberta is doing. I don't care what the federal government is doing. I'm talking about what the municipal government of Coaldale can do for truth and reconciliation. We need to lead the charge, not always be followers, not wonder what Lethbridge is doing, what's Calgary doing, what's BC doing. Let's worry about what's Coaldale's doing. We were elected to represent the citizens of Coaldale, not the citizens of Lethbridge, not the citizens of Alberta. I'm not an MLA. I'm a proud town councillor for the town of Coaldale. And I will speak on behalf of, we need to start the reconciliation here in Coaldale, not wait to see what everybody else is doing. So that's why I will vote against this, because I feel our town staff deserve the opportunity to pay tribute to the reconciliation of the Indigenous peoples.
I am happy to rescind my motion if you would like to make a motion on that, Jason, or Councillor Avery, sorry.
If Councillor Simpson is rescinding her motion, I would just go with the option one that Councillor elect to adopt September 30th as Truth and Reconciliation Day for the town of Coaldale, making it a new statutory holiday for the town of Coaldale.
Okay, we have Councillor Avery's motion. Lana, can you confirm that we're still okay with live stream? I saw a signal interruption there.
Yes, Mayor, everything's all good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, any discussion? Councillor Chapman?
Just a question on the motion that the collective agreement then would be still, it wouldn't be part of the negotiation, part of the collective agreement at the end of the day, right?
There would be no, at the end of the day, if council proceeds with this motion, so September 30th would just essentially become a new statutory holiday going forward. And that's the intention, so that's what it would be in the future.
Councillor White?
Thank you, Your Worship. We've just gone around here in a whole circle. I don't understand why Councillor Simpson rescinded our motion. Like, we were all sort of agreeing to that. This just blows my mind.
Well, it is a troubling situation because it's, in my mind, it's not about the dollars. I don't care about, the dollars don't bother me. It's just, I'm okay with spending the dollars because it's important, but it's a matter of how it comes across and that. And I think it does a bit of damage to alienating municipal employees and whatnot. I already said that. So we have a motion by Councillor Avery on the table. And unless there's any more questions, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's Councillor Avery and Councillor Holm opposed. Okay, and that's myself, Simpson, Chapman, Lloyd, and Pauls. Okay, so I guess we went around that a lot. So unless anybody wants to make any other motions on 8.1, then we'll move on to 9.1 then.
I can remake my motion if so wish.
Okay, Councillor Simpson moves to proclaim September 30th, 2021 as Truth and Reconciliation Day in the town of Coaldale. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, and that's myself, Simpson, Chapman, and Lloyd opposed. Councillor Holm, Councillor Pauls, and Councillor Avery. Okay, that's passed. And then we have item 9.1.
So for 9.1 here, we have the financial update for Q2. So this is for the period ending June 30th, 2021. In the staff report, there is essentially the income statement for the town of Coaldale up to June 30th, which shows the budget amounts and the year-to-date amounts with the corresponding amount of budget remaining. For the majority of these items, the town is on good pace to remain on budget. However, there are a couple outliers that I'm just going to go over. Should there be any other questions that I don't address in this report, I'd be happy to take questions from council on that as well. One of the main aspects that we have talked about at previous council meeting is our MSI operating grant. Previous amounts were $265,000 approximately, to which we had budgeted the same. For 2021 and in all likelihood going forward, this amount will be reduced to $65,000 for the town of Coaldale. So that's a $200,000 loss. The reason being is that for municipalities under 10,000 people, there is essentially an extra pot of money available that is split between those municipalities. When a municipality exceeds the assessment growth or benchmark of the province of Alberta by 60%, they become no longer eligible for that funding. If you're 59, you're fully eligible, and you're at 61, you are not eligible. So there is no middle ground. It is right in the middle. Due to Coaldale's high growth over the past couple of years and our increase in assessment, the town of Coaldale is no longer eligible for this funding pool. So I highly doubt that our growth assessment will decrease based on the rates it has enough in the future to make us eligible for these funds again. So it's unfortunate that we are losing these annual grant dollars, but it is because of a good reason that we've exceeded provincial benchmarks. Our land development, as council is aware of, the Northeast Industrial lot sales have had a great year and are on track to essentially sell out or have sold out by the end of the year or that near time being. So that revenue is higher than expected. Revenue from all our Northeast Industrial land sales do go back to capital reserves and are not used for operating expenses. So that cash is used again for future capital purposes. License permits and fees, this revenue is also higher than budgeted. Town of Coaldale is now able to collect various fees such as development fees and subdivision fees that previously developers were always charged. However, they were being collected by ORIS because they were the one performing the work for the town of Coaldale. Now that the town of Coaldale is performing this work internally, we're now able to collect these fees, which has increased revenue. On the budgeting standpoint, or so on the expense standpoint for the operating budget, the biggest item of note is the RCMP policing costs. So the federal government and the RCMP have come to an agreement on a new collective agreement, which will be retro back, I believe, to 2017. As a result of this, the town of Coaldale will have a retro pay for RCMP police costing, which will be a one-time expense of approximately $275,000. This isn't simply for the town of Coaldale. This retro payment is for all municipalities which do have RCMP policing costs. The town of Coaldale proportionately will be charged more as we are responsible for 100% of policing costs, while others have the 70-30 split that we're all well aware of. Finally, the third item is when council set the property tax mill rate, we amended the budget for an extra $105,000 to cover the RCMP rent charge. With a new facility open, the town of Coaldale will have to pay a proportionate amount of rent to the federal government in occupation costs based on the number of town of Coaldale employee or town served RCMP employees in that facility. The annual cost will be approximately $100,000 to $115,000 for a full year. Again, with the RCMP detachment just recently opening, there won't be a full year cost in there, so that cost will be slightly lower. So that will help offset some of the burden from the retro RCMP policing cost. Those are the items of note from the operating budget. I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions from council before I proceed on to the capital budget discussion.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Is there any questions for Kyle? And I guess just of note, later in the agenda, there's a letter to public safety about the RCMP costs. And I think FCM and AUMA and other groups are lobbying for the government of Canada to absorb that retro pay, since none of the municipal partners and whatnot were at the actual bargaining table to sign off on it. And so it's not necessary, you know, it's a high probability that that cost will be passed along to Coaldale, but, you know, one could wish and hope that the lobbying efforts are successful and the federal government will absorb the back pay in that. I guess the jury's still out on that matter. I don't see any other questions of council, so we'll let Kyle continue then.
On the capital side, the Main Street redevelopment project, which of note, when the budget was previously passed, had a budget of approximately $4.8 million. This was reduced to a budget of $3.54 million because of construction costs coming in lower. The savings from those projects was ultimately allocated to the multi-use recreation center. Now that the project has essentially come to wraps, we're projecting a final total cost of $3.45 million, which is approximately $90,000 under that amended approved council budget. The fire hall expansion and renovation total cost expected to be $4.582 million, 65 over the amended final budget. Phase 1 of the Pathways project, which includes expansion of the pathways to the new Owl's Nest campground, is near completion. We are anticipating this to cost $843,000, which is $157,000 under the $1 million budget. The municipal portion of infrastructure related to the campground partnership will total $320,000. This is $40,000 over the previously budgeted amount. The wastewater lift station is now complete, which had a total cost of just over $752,000, slightly under budget by $17,000. The mountain bike project and the arena floor slab, at the time of this report, were still ongoing. However, we expect those projects to be near the actual ending budget. The Kin Shelter playground was redone this year on budget with a very trivial overage. The museum repairs are progressing well. However, there was the addition, or they did find additional concrete underground once they started digging and found this. Because of this, there will be additional work to break the concrete up, remove it, and fill in the hole. This will result in the expected final cost going from $140,000 previously to $175,000, which is approximately $35,000 over budget. The traffic lights for Highway 3 and 30th came in an expected final cost of $780,000, which was $30,000 over the previously expected cost of $750,000. Excuse me. The final lift of asphalt was completed. 1 second here, sorry. The final lift of asphalt in the industrial park was completed for a total cost of $365,000, which was $105,000 under budget. And the civil works for Northwest Coaldale development as part of the joint high school and recreation center has started. We are expecting costs for this project to be approximately $2.86 million. This is over and above the previously budgeted amount of $2.5 million. So to summarize both of the operating and the capital side, first on the capital side, we're projecting total capital projects to be $160,000 over budget. This is approximately 1% over on $16 million worth of capital projects. Typically, how we will look at funding these is allocate any operational surplus at the end of the year to cover this balance. Should that not be an option based on the reduced MSI and higher policing costs as identified, administration will look at other options. We do have excess grant funds as well as capital reserves that we will bring forward to council as part of the year-end financial statements. With the operating budgets, we are aware of those two items that will have an individual deficit. However, administration-wise, we are continually monitoring the budget for areas that we can have potential small surpluses to make up and still come back with a balanced year-to-date actuals at the end of the year. Typically, the municipality will have a surplus of a couple $100,000 if everything goes on track, just based on small surpluses within various departments. So we are hopeful that we can bring this back to council at the end of the year, but time will tell at this moment. As we've discussed previously, all our town's budget information year-to-date actuals are available online at our Questica at coaldale.openbrook.questica.com. These actuals are updated quarterly and have been updated for the June 30th amounts. With that being said, this concludes my report, and I'll turn it back to council for questions.
Hey, are there any questions of our CFO? If there are any, I'll take them. I want to thank you for preparing your report and all the analysis that you've done. And there's a lot of work to keep on top of it all. And I guess before the end of the year, we'll know, like you said before, the Coaldale is growing and our assessments and whatnot is growing. So that may not how the budget closes off the year as well for as we move into 2022. But any questions, Sir Kyle? Okay, I see. Oh, Councillor Holm.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just through to Kyle, is there any capital projects that we have still on the books that we haven't started yet that could be deferred until the next budget cycle, just to try and keep us a little closer to the budget that we passed?
If you're so if you're looking to defer a project, ultimately it wouldn't help add any funds to this capital budget to stay on track. To basically add funds, you would have to be looking at canceling a project. That way we could, cancel or reduce the scope of a project and allocate funds to this. There isn't, looking at the budget and the projects that have not started, the ones of note are the Malloy Phase 2B, which obviously isn't an option. There are the funds allocated to that regional stormwater thing, which we've kind of already committed to as well. There is the Pathways Phase 2 budget of $250,000, which will help provide connectivity to and from the recreation center. So that's not really an item there. Unfortunately, I don't see any good options for that right now. With that being said, the largest overage, has been the civil works. So if we do have enough operational surplus to cover those off, we'll be fine from that perspective. If we don't, it's maybe where we look at grant funding to offset that one project, as that is the lion's share of it. But unfortunately, we'll just have to wait and see till the end of the year where the actual numbers come in.
Thank you, Kyle.
Any further questions? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Kyle, for all your work on this presentation and your report here. What are you sensing out there in terms of the overall climate for some of the not only capital projects, but maybe even some on the operational side? So for example, when we redid Main Street, we saved a big bundle of money. I can't remember what the exact number was doing Main Street. Now we're seeing, above budget, say, for example, the street lights or some of the other, some of the other capital projects. Are you seeing sort of changes from 2 years ago during initial COVID crisis to now?
It has been a very up and down trend. Like if we talk about Main Street, that in 8th Street North, even for example, you know, that was originally 4 million and it came in at like 1.8 million. So pre-COVID, there were a lot of construction projects that did come in under budget. You know, that could be due to multiple factors of construction costs being lower or overestimating on budget amounts. During COVID, we did see cost of materials increase and inflation, which did have a negative impact on some projects, such as the lagoons. Those costs did come in higher than we had estimated based on inflation and some of that aspects. However, coming down as we kind of as the economy is proceeding, we have seen some material costs come down lower than they were during the heights in COVID, and we are starting to see some of those construction costs come down. We haven't seen it formally yet, but it's kind of what we're expecting, not expecting, but what we're hoping for. And so that will help some of the projects that, you know, were such as the Recreation Center and Civic Square as those projects proceed here. So ultimately, it doesn't look like commodity prices are going up. They are coming down, and that should be helpful for our purposes.
Councillor Home?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move the council approve this report. Thank you very much, Kyle.
Okay, Councillor Avery, did you have your hand up or no? Okay. Any other questions? Okay, we have Councillor Holmes' motion. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you again, Kyle. And we have item 9.2, Senate vote. Lana?
Hi, Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have a two-part presentation tonight. First part is regarding the Senate vote and referendum questions, and the second part was leading up into a recap for the election. So I just thought that they would be worthy of separate items. So as you've been hearing, so Elections Canada declared that the Lieutenant Governor and Council passed an order to include a Senate vote and referendum questions in the upcoming municipal election to be held on October 18th, which will piggyback with our municipal election. There will be up to 3 senators on the ballot, according to the Alberta Senate Election Act, whose names are be submitted to the Government of Alberta to the Queen's Privy Council for Canada as a person who may be summoned to the Senate of Canada for the purpose of filling a vacancy related to Alberta. Electors will also be asked to vote on 2 referendum questions. The first one being that should Section 36-2 of the Constitution Act of 1982, Parliament and the Government of Canada's commitment to the principle of making equalization payments be removed from the Constitution. The second question was, do you want Alberta to adopt year-round daylight savings time, which is summer hours, eliminating the need to change our clocks back twice a year? So it was just providing it for some information. If any council had any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Questions? Okay, it's fairly obvious. I think we just received this for information. Who wants to move that? Councillor Lloyd, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you for that, Lana. Then your second part.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen here for my presentation regarding the election. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, excellent. So we have our election. We have 1 polling station, which will be located at the Coaldale Community Center. Nomination day, the final day to submit nomination papers is Monday, September 20th. The hours between 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. I will be sitting in council chambers waiting for any last minute nominations. As well, anyone can file nomination papers leading up to that day anytime The nomination period actually opened up January 1st of this year and is up until September 20th. Advanced voting will be held again at the Community Center for October 2, 5, 9, and 14 from 2 until 8 p.m. And then with Election Day being Monday, October 18th. We are offering institutional voting again, once again with this election. There will be polling stations set up at the Sunny South Lodge for senior residents, which will be available on October 18th from 10 a.m. until 12 noon. There will be institutional voting available with the polling station set up at the Coaldale Long-Term Care Facility for residents. And this is based on availability, based on interest and appointment. Electors assisted at home is also an available option for residents with a disability that are unable to make it to the polling station. The election bylaw 801-GE-02-21 was received third reading on February 8th, 2021. The bylaw encompasses the joint school trustee elections if need be. So far, they do not have any, they only have one incumbents for both school divisions. So they do not have an election yet for the 2 wards that apply to our area of town. Included in the bylaw was nomination day and advance voting dates as determined by myself as the returning officer, the use of electronic tabulators, and the use of institutional voting and electors assisted at home. Again, nomination day is Monday, September 20th from 9 until noon. The advance voting days are Saturday, October 2, Tuesday, October 5, Saturday, October 9th, and Thursday, October 14th. And voting day will be from 10 a.m. until 8 p.m. So when to vote? Electors are encouraged to vote on any of the 4 advanced voting dates to help reduce the quantity of people on election day. I will talk about it later in my presentation, but the last election we had just shy of 2,300 people come out to vote, and almost 1,800 of them came on election day. So I'm really hoping that we can kind of spread that out. You don't need a reason to vote on an advanced day. You can just come out. So this here is a copy of one of the giant signs that I had printed, and we'll be putting them on the grass at the community center in hopes that when people are driving by, as a way to remind them that they can come out and vote. There is advertising in the Sunny South News as well as our website, and we have an election section page in there as well dedicated to this. So our advertising dates that we are advertising, the notice of nomination day did go in the Sunny South News September 7th and 14th. A notice of advance vote advertised on September 21 and 28. The notice of election and the voter ID requirements are advertised September 14th, October 5 and 12. The institutional voting will take place at the Sunny South Lodge. I will be advertising there with separate posters. Voting is available to the Coaldale Healthcare long-term residents by appointment. And again, I will be putting up posters there as well. And the electors assisted at home is an option for those with disabilities that cannot make it to the polling station. I just wanted to point out that having COVID is not a disability, considered a disability in the eyes of municipal affairs. So again, with the advanced voting dates, I'm encouraging people, if you feel healthy and well, to please come out to one of those dates in the event that you're unable to on election day. So for the election 2021 nominations, a candidate interested in running must complete the nomination form, and it must be signed by at least 5 electors that are eligible to vote on October 18th, which would include that they are residents of the town of Coaldale and that they do not have a criminal record check and that they're of the age of 18. Election signs are included in the land use bylaw for a 60-day window that started August 22nd and will go until October 20th. And so for this is the tabulator that we have rented. So we have 3 of them rented. 1 will be used for the advanced voting and 2 will be used for election day. Votes are scanned into the tabulator and results are not visible on the machine. The ballots can be scanned any which way, like upside down, backwards, face up, face down, it doesn't matter. It reads it every which way. At the close of polls on election day, all tabulators will print the result tapes of showing the voter totals, and the totals are then all added together. Each tabulator has a locked memory card and security key that's only accessible to myself. Some of the features, it will provide a complete audit trail, including digital images of every ballot in the event of a close results or a potential recount. The tabulator eliminates the need for staff to perform lengthy, costly, and error-prone tasks of counting ballots. And in the event of a power outage, there's a 4-hour battery backup on the tabulator. Election workers are trained with the tabulator on September 30th of this month, and the tabulator rental includes an on-site support worker from Election Day from ES&S, and they've also provided extensive manuals and training videos on the tabulator. This is just kind of like an idea of what the ballots will look like. The one on the left, I realize it's quite small, but the one on the left is the actual ballot with mayor, councilor, and the possible school trustees. And then they have some plebiscite questions on the bottom here. On the ballot on the right is the Senate vote and the referendum questions. So that's kind of an idea of what it might look like. This is the election 2021 budget. We have a $30,000 budget. The cost of the tabulator of $8,631, which is a considerable savings from the last election. Last election, the tabulator rental was around $15,000. So this was a really great savings. Estimated labor costs of coming in at $7,000, the advertising and printing of $4,500, the estimated rentals of $660, and some incidentals for $2,000, bringing under budget of $7,209. These are some statistics from the 2017 election. Last election, we had a 39.18% voter turnout with 3 advanced vote dates where 485 residents cast their votes then. Again, on this election, we are doing 4 advanced voting dates in hopes again that people will come out and help spread out so it's not so congested on election day. And again, on election day last 2017, 1,780 residents came out to vote. Sunny South Lodge had 33 voters. The Coaldale Hospital long-term care was 5, and electors assisted at home was 2. The polls closed at 8 p.m. and voters finished voting by 8:20. At the time when the doors were locked, there was about 50 people that were in line. So it took about 20 minutes for them to get through and voted. The institutional votes were fed into the tabulator. The advanced votes were added to the final results and posted to the website and distributed to the media by 9:10 p.m. So the results come out quite quickly. It's quite nice. So this is what happens on voting day. So I was just going to show you my next picture so you can kind of follow along. So you'll see on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, this is a layout of the community center, what it will look like on election day. So residents will be entering in here on the right-hand side into the east doors. They'll be met by a greeter at the door, asking them to, if they have their applicable ID. There is quite an extensive voter ID list, right down to if you just moved and you don't have any, like a copy of a utility bill or anything of your ID that has your current address, you can actually get a letter from your landlord. So I do have that on a large list so that it's very clear to electors as they come inside. So they'll be met here by a greeter. On election day, I'm having a greeter stand outside as well to reflect the same information. They come inside here, they're met by information clerks. There'll be 4 of them right here. They will be taking their ID and writing out an electoral statement that the voter will be agreeing to. They'll indicate whether they're a public or a separate school supporter, and then they will continue down into the lines here. At the last election, it became quite congested, so I have rented stanchions. They're like the tape things you see at the airport that will help like direct lines. So hopefully that makes it a little bit more clear for this election and a little bit more efficient. Then electors will make their way up to the deputy returning officers. There will be 3 here, which will take their electoral statement and trade it for a ballot. And as with the Senate and referendum questions, they will receive 2 ballots. One will be to voting for the council, and one will be voting for those 2 questions on the ballot. So they will be handed in a secrecy sleeve. The elector will be met by a booth clerk, which will help them direct to say which booth is available for them to go to.
They will make their way into the 6 booths. Last election, we only had 3. This time we're doing 6, just to help, again, be efficient and get people out sooner. After they finish their voting, making their voting selections, they come out and they will be met by a ballot box clerk, which will feed their their ballots into the tabulators right here. And then the elector or the voter exits out the west door here. So hopefully it runs a lot more efficient. In the back here will be a table set up for any scrutineers that wish to be present on election day during the, to observe the voting process. They are allowed to be in the building. Should the person that they're representing, the candidate that they're representing come in, the screeners would have to exit the building while the candidate is making their vote selection, and then they could trade and come back in afterwards. Some safety measures like during COVID. So I consulted with the federal election returning officer to find out what practices they were adhering to for their election coming up here. And so we decided to mirror their same practices, being that all election workers will be required to wear a mask, distance, and sanitize, and that we will encourage electors coming to vote to wear a mask at their discretion. We will have plastic desk barriers in place at the information clerk desk and the deputy returning officer stations. These measures are to support the town's best practice in keeping election workers and the public safe. However, these measures cannot be strictly enforced unless mandated by the province or by the town of Coaldale Council. And as a result, election workers staff do not have the authority to enforce them. We will have posters on the door requesting voters to wear a mask, socially distance, and sanitize. And that's all I have, unless any council had any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Lana. Lana. Okay. There we go. Councilor Chapman.
Yeah, just a quick question to Lana. You'd mentioned about COVID. Can you just refresh me on that? It is not a disability, as you, did I hear that?
No, and I did reach out to confirm that, because I suspect that could be a question for people to say, like, I don't feel well, I can't come down to vote, what do I do? So again, that's why I encourage people, like, as the advanced vote dates are spread out, that, you know, if you're feeling well, to please come down and vote. Like, don't wait until election day to find out that you're not well.
And that would encourage more people to not only vote, but also to be able to space out and not be congested.
Absolutely.
Because that would be my concern, would be the spacing, you know, when you're lined up in, and then of course, if it's a cold night, nobody wants to be standing outside.
No.
All right, Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, Worship. Do we send information out to the residents regarding advanced dates and stuff like that?
I do. I did include advanced voting dates in the Sunny South News. Like, it is required a minimum of 2 weeks prior to the start of it. So that has already been in motion. So you'll see those come out in the Sunny South News. It's also included in our website. It's included in the nomination packages. It's on our social media. It's also, I have rented those billboard signs that will be, I have 4 signs coming on the close of nomination day. I thought that it might be more effective after the end of the federal election, so they'll go up on the 21st. So I have those at all the entrances at the by the tree farm coming into Coaldale. I have one on the grass at the Dairy Queen in the Green McCain Park across. I have one coming out of Cottonwood on the 845, and then I have one at the Shell station on the grass there, you know, as close as I can get to the train tracks and still be allowed.
Great. Well, thanks for all your hard work on that.
Thank you.
Unless there's more questions, I entertain a motion to receive Lana's report for information. Counselor Holm, all in favor? Okay, that's unanimous.
Thank you.
And then we have item 9.4, Waves and Blades Innovation Working Group. Russ?
You bet. Thank you, Your Worship, and through the Chair to Mayor and Council. So at the regular meeting of Council held on January the 18th, 2021, Council did provide staff with the direction to include aquatics as part of the working group and support a draft of the new terms of reference at that time. So 6 aquatic representatives were selected through public process and based both on their experience in aquatics and their passion they share concerning the future of aquatics in Coaldale. Some of the newly appointed aquatics rep, along with the existing arena enhancement group, certainly have worked on a piece for terms of reference as presented and attached to you tonight. And so I'm just going to kind of go through that briefly and kind of outline what is new, which is highlighted throughout here. First and foremost is they've come up with a name that I think is pretty catchy, but it is the Waves and Blades Sportsplex Innovation Working Group is what they wish to present to council at this time. On page 2 of that, it has the structure a little more developed from the direction given by council in January. It shows that there are 6 representatives from aquatics and that there are still 6 representatives. We've encompassed each major user group of ice use as well as a community arena representative to get that 6 split between the 2. Through most of the rest of the documents, it was really just applying the aquatics and pool wording in there because it actually captured quite nicely the future development and ideas of both aquatics and a second sheet of ice. On page number 4, we wanted to capture the 2019 consultant suggestion and condition assessment of the pool, so we did that as well. And we wanted to make sure that we also captured Councillor Simpson's motion back in 2019, motion to postpone the public engagement to December of this year. And as such, the timelines were adjusted a little bit. And even though it may seem to appear at the beginning of the timelines that we're maybe a little bit behind, when you look at the benchmarks, there's some flexibility in there. And by February of 2022, we feel like we can kind of catch back up to that step 6. And so we didn't adjust them at this meeting we had just last week with the group. They supported the document as you see presented here. So this group will continue to meet virtually and in person where it's safe and where it makes sense. In fact, we've already determined that in October it will be a Zoom meeting. Staff anticipate that there will be new information prepared and ready very soon for further public engagement anticipated. They're meeting the second Wednesday of each month. It's also in the terms of reference. Council may wish to consider approval of the attached terms of reference developed in conjunction with and supported by all members of the newly formed Waves and Blades Sportsplex Innovation Working Group, either as written or with any amendments as you see fit. But if amendments are desired, it is suggested that amendments be able to be reviewed and commented by the group prior to being finalized in the terms of reference. And so administration recommends at this time that council approve the Waves and Blades Sportsplex Innovation Working Group terms of reference as attached.
Thank you, Russ. Thanks for all your work and that. Looks like the group came up with some really good stuff. And any questions? Councillor Avery.
Thank you, and thanks, Russ. I'm just wondering, when your group meets, is there minutes taken, and is there some place where they're posted where the rest of the public can look at those minutes to get updates so we don't be accused of not being transparent and then just saying this is what's going to happen?
Thank you, through the Chair to Council Avery. Certainly, so there are minutes taken. And they are currently distributed to the group. They are, not to my knowledge, are they posted publicly, but that's certainly something we can look at and wouldn't be a problem from my viewpoint, for sure.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Is council okay with the terms of reference as presented then? If so, then we get Councillor Simpson.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, to adopt the terms of reference as presented. Any discussion? Okay, I see none. Call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Russ.
Thank you.
And then we have item 10.1. And so we have, tonight was a Zoom meeting and listening to the different updates and whatnot, I think all the reasons why tonight was a Zoom meeting. It gives valid reason why the final two meetings of council should be the same. The numbers aren't going down, and we have public hearings and all that we have to advertise, and we have to be certain about all the formality of the public hearings and whatnot. So I certainly don't see any valid reason why we should move away from the Zoom meetings for the remainder of the term, since we're kind of saddled with the same COVID situation. So Councillor White.
You're looking to a motion to have the next two meetings on Zoom?
Yeah.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous as well. Thank you very much. And then we have 11.1. Councillor Chapman. You're on mute still, or?
I'll move to receive.
Okay. I think it might be more appropriate to adopt it as being read by all members of council.
I'll word it that way. That'd be great.
Any discussion? All in favor? Yeah, that's carried unanimously. And then the information items 12.1 and 12.2. They're in the motion to receive those two for information unless there's questions. Councillor Simpson moves 12.1 and 12.2 for information. All in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. And we're at the end of the public portion. And so then at this point in time, I consider a motion that would read as follows: that council move to go into closed session at 8:10 p.m. in accordance with section 197 brackets 2 of the Municipal Government Act to discuss matters exempt from disclosure for agenda items 13.1, 13.2, 13.3, and 13.4, subject to FOIP section 16, third party business interest, section 17, third party personal privacy, and section 21, 22, 23, 24, intergovernment relations. So if who wants to make a motion to go in camera under that motion? Councillor Chapman, okay. All in favor? Okay, so it is at 8:11 now. So I would just to give everybody, it's been a long meeting so far, so we'll take maybe 10 minutes. So we'll reconvene.